My daughter asked why daddy's friend sleeps over when I work night shifts. She was 5, standing in the kitchen doorway with her stuffed rabbit, asking innocent questions that shattered my world. I'd been working the overnight shift at the hospital for 8 months. Good money, better hours than days. And it meant I could be home when she got back from kindergarten. My husband had been supportive, encouraging even. I laughed it off. What do you mean, sweetie? Daddy doesn't have friends over. But she insisted. The nice lady with the yellow car. The one who smells like flowers. She's there when I wake up sometimes for water. My stomach dropped. I kept my voice steady and asked what else she'd seen. She said the lady makes pancakes and kisses daddy like mommy does. Then she skipped away to play with her dolls. That night, I called in sick. Told my manager I had food poisoning. At home, I tucked my daughter into bed and waited. At midnight, I heard his phone buzz. I'm leaving soon, he texted someone. She bought the food poisoning excuse. His car pulled out at 12:30 a.m. I followed him across town to a condo complex I'd never seen before. Unit 2B, yellow Volkswagen in the driveway. I didn't confront him that night. Instead, I documented everything. I tracked his location for 2 weeks. Photographed his car at her place on every night I supposedly worked. Checked our bank statements and found cash withdrawals, restaurant charges, hotel rooms. 6 months of my overnight shifts funding his affair. I'd been exhausted, working to provide for our family, while he played house with someone else. The breaking point came when I found the texts. Thousands of messages going back 8 months, right when I took the night position. They'd met at his gym. She was a yoga instructor, younger, childless. Their messages detailed their future together. He called me the obligation. Our daughter was the complication they'd handle later. He told her he was waiting for the right moment to leave, that seeing her was the only thing keeping him sane. I called a lawyer the next morning, filed for divorce and full custody. My husband came home from work to find papers on the kitchen table and his belongings in trash bags on the lawn. He was shocked, genuinely confused how I'd found out. I told him our daughter had excellent observation skills. She's 5, he sputtered. She doesn't understand what she saw. She understood enough, I said. His girlfriend started calling me, crying, apologizing, saying she didn't know I existed for the first 4 months. He'd told her we were separated, that the divorce was almost final, that I was emotionally abusive and kept him from his daughter. She'd believed every word until she saw our family photos still hanging in the house. The divorce took 7 months. He fought for split custody, claiming I was being vindictive. But the judge reviewed the evidence, the timeline, the text messages discussing my daughter as a problem to solve later. He got supervised visitation every other weekend. I got the house, full custody, and child support that actually covered our expenses. 2 years later, I found out he'd married the yoga instructor. They'd invited his entire family except us. 6 months after that, she filed for divorce. Apparently, she'd discovered texts between him and another woman, someone he'd met at their gym. Last week, my daughter and I were at the grocery store when we saw them in the parking lot, arguing beside that same yellow car. My daughter tugged my sleeve and whispered, "Isn't that Daddy's friend who used to sleep over?" I smiled and said, "Not anymore, sweetie." As we loaded groceries into our car, I glanced back. He was standing alone now, watching us leave. For a moment, our eyes met. I saw something flicker across his face, regret maybe, or recognition of what he'd lost. Then my daughter started telling me about her school project, and I turned away. That night, she asked me a question that made my blood run cold. "Mommy, why does Daddy's new friend look exactly like his old friend who slept over?" I froze with the dinner plates in my hands. "What do you mean, honey?" "When we saw Daddy in the parking lot," she said, coloring at the kitchen table, "there was a different lady in his car. She had brown hair like the yoga lady, and she was crying too." My daughter was 7 now, old enough to notice patterns, old enough to remember faces. I sat down beside her and asked her to describe what she'd seen. She said the new lady looked younger than the yoga instructor, that she'd been wearing workout clothes, that my ex-husband had been yelling at her through the car window while his now ex-wife stood outside screaming. I thought about it all night, about the text messages I'd found years ago, about how he'd called our daughter a complication, about how quickly he'd married the woman he'd cheated with, only to have her file for divorce 6 months later for the exact same reason. The next morning, I did something I swore I'd never do. I looked up his ex-wife on social media. Her name was Beverly. Her profile was private, but her profile picture showed a woman who looked exhausted, defeated. I sent her a message. "Hi, I'm his first wife. I think we should talk." She responded within an hour. "Coffee? Today?" We met at a cafe across town. Beverly looked different from her wedding photos, thinner, dark circles under her eyes. She ordered black coffee and didn't touch it. "Thank you for reaching out," she said quietly. "I wasn't sure if you'd want anything to do with me." "I didn't," I admitted. "For a long time, you were the person who destroyed my marriage." But then my daughter said something that made me realize we might have more in common than I thought. Beverly's hands shook as she wrapped them around her coffee cup. "He cheated on you too, didn't he? Before me. With you," I said. It wasn't a question. She nodded, tears welling up. "He told me you were separated, that the marriage had been over for years, that you were keeping his daughter from him out of spite." She paused. I believed him because I wanted to, because he made me feel special, like I was different from whoever came before. "How long did it take?" I asked. "For him to cheat? 8 months. Same gym where we met. Different instructor." She laughed bitterly. "The Pilates teacher this time, Brooke. She's 24. I'm 31. You know what's funny? When I confronted him, he said the exact same things he probably said to you, that I was crazy, that I was imagining things, that his phone records and bank statements were none of my business." I pulled out my phone and showed her screenshots I'd kept, the text messages from years ago, the timeline, the lies he'd told both of us. Beverly stared at the screen, her face going pale. These are almost identical to the ones I found. Same language, same excuses, same promises to leave his wife. She looked up at me. I'm his wife in these messages, aren't I? The obligation he needed to escape from. You were, I said. Just like I was before you. Just like Brooke probably will be after you. We sat in silence for a long moment. Then Beverly said something that changed everything. She has no idea what she's getting into. Brooke, I've seen her at the gym. She's so young. She thinks she's won some prize. Beverly's voice hardened. She thinks she's different. Special. That he'll treat her better than he treated us. Are they serious? I asked. He moved in with her a month ago, into her apartment. He's broke, you know. Spent everything trying to fight the divorce. His lawyer fees alone were astronomical, and he lost everything anyway. I got the condo, half his retirement, and alimony for 5 years. She smiled grimly. Turns out judges don't like men who serially cheat and lie under oath. An idea formed in my mind. Probably a bad one. Definitely petty. But the thought of him doing this to another woman, another family someday, made my blood boil. Do you still go to that gym? I asked. Beverly's eyes met mine. I saw understanding dawn. Tuesdays and Thursdays. Brooke teaches at 6 p.m. What if we both happened to take her class this Thursday? We didn't plan what we'd say. We just showed up. Beverly was already there when I arrived, stretching in the back row. Brooke was at the front, setting up equipment. She was beautiful. Long dark hair, bright smile, the kind of confidence that comes from not knowing what's waiting for her. The class started normally. Pilates exercises, breathing techniques, adjustments to form. Beverly and I didn't acknowledge each other. We just waited. After class, as people were rolling up their mats, Beverly approached the front desk. Excuse me, Brooke. I wanted to thank you for the class. You're an excellent instructor. Brooke beamed. Oh, thank you so much. I try my best. I walked over, casual, like I was just waiting to ask a question. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I couldn't help overhearing. You're Brooke? She nodded, looking confused. Yes. Have we met? Not formally, I said. But I think we have someone in common. You're dating a man who used to be married to her. I gestured to Beverly. And before that, to me. The color drained from Brooke's face. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do, Beverly said gently. His name is in your phone right now. Probably texting you that he misses you. That he can't wait to see you tonight. That you're different from everyone else. Brooke's hand moved instinctively to her phone. He told me you were crazy, both of you, that you made his life hell. I'm sure he did, I said. Did he also tell you about our daughter? How he called her a complication in text messages to his mistress? How he fought for custody just to hurt me, then barely exercised the visitation he was granted? Or how he told me you were keeping his daughter from him, Beverly added. How he was the victim of a vindictive ex-wife who couldn't move on. Brooke looked between us, her expression shifting from confusion to something like horror. He said he was divorced, that it was final. It is now, Beverly said. As of 10 days ago. Which means he was living with you while still legally married to me, while telling me he was staying at his brother's place to give us space. I pulled up photos on my phone, screenshots of text messages, bank statements, court documents. This is what he sent his previous mistress. I'm guessing you've received messages that sound familiar. I handed her my phone. Brooke scrolled through, her hands trembling. These are almost the same, word for word. She looked up at us. How long were you married? 8 years, I said. 1 year, Beverly said. But we dated for 2 before that. We've been together for 9 months. Brooke whispered. He moved in 5 weeks ago. He said he needed to save money for a lawyer, that his evil ex-wife took everything. I took half of what we built together, Beverly corrected. An alimony because he committed adultery. It's in the court records. Public information. Brooke sank into a chair. He said he loved me, that I was different, that he'd never felt this way before. He said that to me too, Beverly said softly. Right up until I found messages to you on his phone. Messages saying the exact same things. We're not here to hurt you, I said. We're here to save you from making the mistakes we made, from wasting years of your life on someone who sees women as interchangeable, who will do to you exactly what he did to us. Brooke was crying now. I quit my last job for him. He said the commute was too far, that we should spend more time together. I gave up my apartment when he moved in. He said it made financial sense. Beverly and I exchanged a look. That's how it starts, Beverly said. Isolation disguised as devotion. My friends stopped calling after he convinced me they were jealous of our relationship. My family stopped visiting after he made every holiday about his schedule, his preferences, his needs. He convinced me to take the night shift at the hospital, I said. Better money, he claimed. More time with our daughter during the day. It never occurred to me that it was really about having his evenings free. Brooke wiped her eyes. What do I do? That's up to you, I said. We're just here to give you information we wish someone had given us. The rest is your choice. We left her sitting there, surrounded by yoga mats and the ruins of whatever future she'd imagined. Beverly walked me to my car. Do you think she'll leave him? Beverly asked. I don't know. I didn't want to believe it when his girlfriend called me 2 years ago, crying about family photos on the walls. Sometimes you have to learn the hard way. True. Beverly paused. Thank you for reaching out, for not hating me. I did hate you, I admitted, for a long time. But then I realized you were just another victim. Another woman who believed a liar because he was good at lying. We exchanged numbers and agreed to keep in touch. Not as friends exactly, but as women who'd survived the same manipulator and wanted to make sure he couldn't do it again. 2 weeks later, Beverly texted me. Brooke kicked him out, changed her locks, filed a restraining order after he showed up drunk, screaming about how she was ruining his life. He's living with his brother now, actually living there this time. I felt a grim satisfaction. Good for her. There's more, Beverly wrote. She's pressing charges. He forged her signature on a lease renewal and maxed out a credit card he opened in her name. Identity theft. Fraud. Seriously? Dead serious. The DA is interested. Apparently he's done this before. Different names, different cities. There are 2 other women who've come forward with similar stories. One from before he even met you. I stared at my phone, processing this. Before me meant his entire identity. Everything I'd thought I knew about our relationship had been built on a foundation of serial deception. The man I'd married, whose child I'd raised, had been a stranger all along. Not just unfaithful, not just a liar, but someone who'd perfected a pattern of destruction long before I'd ever met him. The detective assigned to the case called me that evening. Her name was Detective Ramirez. She'd been working fraud cases for 15 years and said she'd never seen anything quite like this. He's meticulous, she explained. He researches his targets, finds women who are independent, financially stable, often with careers in caregiving professions, nurses, teachers, social workers, women who are naturally trusting and want to see the best in people. That's not a coincidence, I said, feeling sick. No, it's not. These women also tend to be isolated from family or friends or in transitional life phases, new to a city, recently divorced, grieving a loss, vulnerable, but not obviously so. He's smart about it. She asked if I'd be willing to be interviewed on record. I agreed immediately. So did Beverly. When Brooke called me that night, she was crying so hard I could barely understand her. He opened 4 credit cards in my name, she sobbed. 4. I didn't know until I tried to rent an apartment and got denied. My credit score is destroyed. The debt collectors are calling constantly. I'm 24 years old and my financial life is ruined. It's not ruined, I said firmly. It's fixable. We're going to fix it. All of it. But the truth was darker than any of us had imagined. Over the next few weeks, as Detective Ramirez dug deeper, the real scope of his crimes emerged. Rachel was woman number 4. He'd been engaged to her while technically still married to his second wife, a woman named Patricia, whom none of us had ever heard of. Patricia had moved to Europe for work and lost touch with everyone they'd known together. She didn't even know about the investigation until Ramirez tracked her down. Stephanie was number 6. Between her and me, there had been another woman, Gina, who died in a car accident 5 years ago. The detective found evidence that he'd opened multiple lines of credit in Gina's name before her death. Her family had been dealing with fraudulent debts for years, assuming identity theft from some random criminal. It had been him all along. How many total? I asked Ramirez during one of our meetings. She looked exhausted. We've confirmed 8 women over 18 years. But there are gaps in the timeline. Cities where he lived, but we can't find records of employment or residence. I think there are more who either don't know their victims or are too ashamed to come forward. 8 women, possibly more. Years and years of calculated destruction. I thought about my daughter, about the innocent questions she'd asked, about how close we'd come to never discovering the truth, about how many women were still out there, living with damaged credit and broken hearts, never knowing they'd been targeted by someone who'd made a career out of exploitation. The next few months were a blur of police interviews, depositions, and court appearances. It turned out my ex-husband had a pattern going back over a decade. He'd meet women, move fast, isolate them, then cheat and move on before they could fully process what had happened. The financial fraud was newer, something he'd started after the divorce had left him broke. Detective Ramirez became almost a friend during this period. She'd call with updates, sometimes just to check in. Most victims never get justice, she told me once. They're too embarrassed to report it, or they blame themselves. What you're doing, what all of you are doing, it matters. The investigation expanded. We discovered he'd used at least 5 different variations of his name over the years. He'd claim he was going by his middle name, or a nickname, or that he'd changed it legally to distance himself from an abusive family. All lies. All calculated to make it harder to trace his history. Patricia, the second wife, flew in from Brussels for a deposition. She was a surgeon, brilliant and accomplished. He'd convinced her to pay for his business venture that never materialized. $80,000 of her savings, gone. She'd written it off as a bad investment and a worse marriage. She'd never thought to press charges. I was so embarrassed, Patricia told us over dinner the night before her testimony. Here I was, someone who'd spent years studying human anatomy, who made life or death decisions daily, and I'd been completely fooled by a con artist. I felt stupid. Still do, sometimes. You're not stupid, Beverly said firmly. He's just been doing this long enough to perfect it. Patricia looked at us, this strange group of women connected by trauma. How do you cope with knowing you weren't special? That everything he said, everything you felt, was just him running a script he'd perfected on other women? I remind myself that my feelings were real, even if his weren't, I said. My love was genuine. My commitment was genuine. His ability to fake emotions doesn't retroactively make mine false. It just makes him a good actor and a terrible person. We all nodded. We'd each struggled with this same question. The gaslighting hadn't ended with the relationships. It continued in our own minds, making us question our judgment, our worth, our capacity to trust ourselves. Rachel organized a meeting for all of us a week before the trial. 8 women, ranging from our mid-20s to mid-40s, sitting in a conference room at her law office. We went around the table, each sharing our story. The patterns were identical. The timelines overlapped. He'd sometimes been juggling multiple relationships at once. Gina's sister attended on her behalf. Her name was Melissa. She brought photos of Gina, a vibrant woman with red hair and an infectious smile. She died thinking she'd ruined her own credit, Melissa said, crying. She'd tried to warn me about him before she died, said he was controlling, isolating. I didn't believe her. I thought she was just bitter about the breakup. We sat in the silence that followed. Gina had tried. She'd seen through him, but no one had listened. And now she was gone, and he'd moved on to destroy more lives. This has to stop with us, Brooke said. However the trial goes, whatever happens, we have to make sure other women know that there are warning signs, that they're not crazy for being suspicious. We agreed. Win or lose, we'd make noise. We'd tell our stories. We'd create a paper trail that would follow him forever. Brooke, Beverly, and I became unlikely allies. We coordinated our testimonies, compared notes, and supported each other through the legal process. 2 other women joined us, both from other cities, both with stories that made mine look almost tame. One had been engaged to him while he was still married to someone else. He'd drained her savings with promises of a wedding that would never happen. The other had supported him through what he claimed was job loss, only to discover he'd been fired for sexual harassment and had spent her money on another girlfriend across town. The trial lasted 8 days. The prosecution built a case around fraud, identity theft, and a pattern of deception that bordered on criminal. His defense tried to paint us as vindictive exes conspiring against an innocent man, but the evidence was overwhelming. Bank records, text messages, testimonies from employers, neighbors, and witnesses who'd seen the pattern play out over years. The courtroom itself was intimidating. High ceilings, dark wood paneling, the kind of formal space that makes you hyper-aware of every sound. We sat together, all 8 of us, in the rows behind the prosecution, a united front. The media had picked up the story by then. Romance fraud ring, the local news called it, which wasn't quite accurate but close enough. His lawyer was a woman, interestingly. I'd expected some slick male attorney trying to discredit us. Instead, we got Margaret Feldman, 60-something, sharp as a knife, who probably took the case for the challenge. She was good. I'll give her that. Isn't it true, she asked Patricia during cross-examination, that you willingly gave him money? That there was no coercion? I gave him money based on lies, Patricia responded coolly. He told me it was for a business license and startup costs. I later discovered there was no business, just another woman he was supporting with my funds. But you can't prove that was his intent from the beginning. I can prove he lied about where the money went. I can prove he never registered a business. I can prove he withdrew cash the same day I transferred money to him. Cash that he then spent on hotel rooms with another woman. Patricia pulled out a folder. I have the receipts. The jury looked interested, very interested. Feldman tried a different angle with Beverly. You were aware of his previous marriage when you began your relationship, correct? I was told he was divorced. Were you told? Or did you ask? Beverly's jaw tightened. He volunteered the information, told me his ex-wife was bitter and vindictive, that she was keeping his daughter from him, that he was struggling to see his child because of her cruelty. And you believed him? Why wouldn't I? I had no reason to think he was lying. He showed me legal documents that looked legitimate, papers that I now know were forged. He was convincing because he'd practiced these lies on multiple women before me. The prosecution objected, sustained, but the point had been made. When it was my turn, Feldman focused on the affair. You've characterized yourself as a victim, Miss Patterson, but weren't you aware your marriage was failing? I was aware my husband had become distant, I said carefully. I attributed it to work stress, to the adjustment of me working nights. I didn't know he was sleeping with someone else because I trusted him. That's what marriage is supposed to be, trust. But surely there were signs. There were. My 5-year-old daughter told me Daddy had friends sleeping over. I laughed it off because the idea that my husband would bring his mistress into our home while our child was there was so far beyond what I thought he was capable of. I was wrong. The jury wasn't laughing. Several looked genuinely angry. On day 6, my daughter had to testify. The judge had ruled her testimony relevant despite her age. She was 8 by then, old enough to understand what was happening, but young enough that the whole situation felt surreal. I'd prepared her as best I could, but watching her walk to the witness stand in her Sunday dress, clutching the stuffed rabbit she'd had since she was 3, nearly broke me. They kept it brief. The prosecutor asked simple questions. Do you remember when you were 5 years old? Do you remember seeing a lady at your house? Can you tell us what you saw? She answered clearly. Yes, she remembered. The nice lady with the yellow car. The one who smelled like flowers. She'd seen her making pancakes in their kitchen. She'd seen her kissing Daddy. She hadn't understood at the time that this was wrong, but she'd been confused about why Daddy had friends over when Mommy was at work. Did you tell your mommy about this? The prosecutor asked gently. Yes. I asked her why Daddy's friends slept over when she worked at night. And what did your mommy do? She got really quiet. Then she asked me more questions. Then she stayed home one night instead of going to work. The defense didn't cross-examine. There was nothing to attack. She was a child telling the simple truth. After she finished, the judge called a recess. I met my daughter in the hallway. She was crying, overwhelmed by the formal setting and the weight of what she'd said. Did I do okay? She asked. You did perfect, I told her. You told the truth. That's all anyone can do. That night, after I'd put her to bed, Beverly called. Your daughter was amazing today. So brave. She shouldn't have had to be, I said. She's 8. She should be worried about homework and whether she'll make the soccer team, not testifying in a criminal trial against her own father. I know, but she was. And she helped make the case. Day 7 brought character witnesses. His brother testified that he'd been a troubled kid, in and out of counseling, suspended from school multiple times for lying and manipulation. His mother, to everyone's surprise, testified for the prosecution. She was elderly, frail, and utterly disgusted with her son. I tried, she said from the stand. God knows I tried to raise him right, but some people are just broken in ways you can't fix. He learned early that lying worked, that people wanted to believe him, and he never stopped. Do you think your son is capable of reform? The prosecutor asked. She looked directly at him. He'd been staring at the table, avoiding eye contact with anyone. No, she said simply. I don't. He's a predator. He'll say whatever he needs to say to get what he wants. I love him because he's my son, but I don't like him, and I don't trust him. The courtroom was silent. A mother testifying against her own child carried weight that no amount of evidence could match. The defense tried to rehabilitate him with testimony from coworkers who said he was friendly, reliable, a good employee. But the prosecution undermined this by showing he'd been fired from multiple jobs for sexual harassment, time card fraud, and misuse of company funds. The pattern was endless. The verdict came on a Thursday afternoon. Guilty on multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, and forgery. Not guilty on the harassment charges, which had been harder to prove, but enough for a sentence that would put him away for 5 years with restitution owed to all 5 of us. Beverly, Brooke, and I sat together in the courthouse, watching as he was led away. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. He glanced back once, his eyes finding mine. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, just relief that it was over. Outside, news crews were waiting. The story had gained traction. Serial romantic fraudster, the headlines would read. 5 women take down manipulative ex. We'd agreed not to give interviews. This wasn't about publicity. It was about justice. But Brooke spoke. She stepped up to the microphones, young and nervous, but determined. If you're in a relationship where someone is isolating you, controlling your money, or making you question your own reality, please know you're not crazy. You're not overreacting. Trust your instincts. Talk to other people. Don't let anyone convince you that love means giving up your autonomy. Beverly and I stood behind her. Silent support. A united front. Life moved forward. My daughter started therapy to process everything. She was resilient, but the trial had been hard on her. She asked questions I didn't always know how to answer. Why would Daddy do those things? Did he ever really love us? Was any of it real? I told her the truth as best I could. That people are complicated. That her father had problems that had nothing to do with her. That his actions were his choices, not her fault. That love shouldn't hurt. Her therapist was a woman named Dr. Chen, who specialized in children of narcissistic parents. She saw my daughter twice a week for 8 months. Sometimes she'd invite me in for family sessions. We'd talk about boundaries, about recognizing manipulation, about building a life untainted by her father's choices. She's remarkably well-adjusted, Dr. Chen told me after one session. Some of that is temperament, but a lot of it is you. The fact that you believed her when she told you about the sleepovers, that you took action immediately, that you protected her from further harm, that matters more than you know. I almost didn't believe her, I admitted. I almost dismissed it as a misunderstanding, but you didn't. You listened, you investigated, you chose her truth over your comfort. That's what good parenting looks like. I cried in the parking lot after that session. Relief, maybe, or just the release of years of guilt and fear. She seemed to accept this. And slowly she stopped asking about him. His supervised visitation had been terminated. He'd be in prison until she was in her teens. By the time he got out, she'd be old enough to decide for herself if she wanted contact. My own therapy was harder. I'd spent years building a life with someone who was essentially a performance artist. Every smile, every "I love you," every moment of supposed intimacy had been calculated. Learning to trust my own judgment again felt impossible. My therapist, Dr. Morrison, was patient. "You're not broken," he'd say. "You're healing. There's a difference." We worked on recognizing red flags, on understanding that my desire to see the best in people wasn't a weakness, but something that had been exploited by someone who'd perfected the art of exploitation, that I could be both trusting and discerning, that one didn't cancel out the other. I learned about trauma bonding, about cognitive dissonance, about how abusers condition their victims to doubt themselves. I learned that the version of my husband I'd loved probably never existed. He'd shown me what I wanted to see, and I'd filled in the rest with my own hopes and assumptions. "But your love was real," Dr. Morrison said. "The person you loved may have been a fiction, but your capacity to love, to commit, to build, that's all real. He can't take that from you." Beverly and I actually became friends. Real friends. We'd meet for coffee every few weeks, comparing notes on our lives. She'd started dating someone new, a man who was patient and kind and understood her history without being threatened by it. She brought him to one of our coffee meetings about a year after the trial. His name was Thomas. He was a high school history teacher, divorced with 2 teenage sons. He had kind eyes and an easy laugh. When Beverly mentioned the trial, he didn't flinch. "She told me everything on our second date," he said. "I appreciated the honesty. My ex-wife had an affair, so I understand betrayal. I'd never judge someone for being deceived by a professional liar." I liked him immediately. He was nothing like the man who'd hurt us all. He asked questions, he listened, he treated Beverly like an equal, not a project or a conquest. They got married 18 months after the trial. Small ceremony, close friends only. I brought my daughter as my +1. She wore a purple dress and asked thoughtful questions about what makes a good marriage. "Respect," Beverly told her. "Trust. Being willing to have hard conversations, and choosing each other every single day, not just when it's easy." My daughter absorbed this. At 9 years old, she was already learning lessons some people never figure out. At the reception, several of us from the trial gathered. Patricia had flown in from Brussels. Brooke drove up from her new city. Rachel brought her wife. Stephanie brought her teenage daughter from a previous relationship. We took a photo together. 8 women who'd survived the same man and came out stronger. "We should do this annually," Patricia suggested. "A reminder that we're more than what he tried to make us." We agreed. Every year since, we've met. Sometimes it's a fancy dinner. Sometimes it's coffee. Once we went camping and spent a weekend hiking and laughing and telling stories that had nothing to do with him, creating new memories to replace the bad ones. Brooke sent messages regularly during this time, photos of her new life, her new teaching position, her new apartment decorated exactly how she wanted. "I'm learning who I am without someone telling me who I should be," she wrote once. "It's harder than I expected, but better." She started dating about a year after leaving him, a woman named Iris, an artist she'd met at a gallery opening. Their relationship moved slowly, deliberately. Brooke was careful now, watchful. She saw warning signs everywhere, sometimes even when they weren't there. I don't know how to trust again, she confessed during one of our group calls. I second-guess everything. If someone's nice to me, I wonder what they want. If someone's interested, I assume they're lying. That's normal, Rachel said. It took me 2 years before I could accept that my wife wasn't going to betray me. Even now, sometimes I check her phone when she's in the shower. Old habits. Do you think we'll ever feel normal again? Brooke asked. We'll feel different, I said. Not worse, just different. More cautious, maybe, but also more certain about what we won't accept. There's power in that. Patricia had perhaps the hardest journey. As a surgeon, she was used to being in control, to having answers, to fixing problems. Being victimized shattered her sense of competency. She took a 6-month sabbatical after the trial, traveling through Southeast Asia, trying to find peace. I kept thinking about all the ways I should have known, she told us during a video call from Thailand. I'm trained to notice details, to see what others miss. How did I not see him for what he was? Because he didn't want you to, Beverly said. Because recognizing manipulation in a medical context is different from recognizing it in someone you love. Because he's really, really good at what he does. Patricia returned to work different, softer somehow, less confident in her invincibility, but more empathetic with her patients. I understand now what it's like to feel helpless, she said. It's made me a better doctor, I think. More patient. More willing to listen when people tell me something's wrong, even if I can't immediately see why. Stephanie threw herself into her work at the domestic violence nonprofit. She'd started as a volunteer, but eventually became director of their survivor outreach program. She created workshops on financial abuse, on recognizing coercive control, on rebuilding credit after identity theft. Every woman who walks through our doors could be any one of us, she said. The only difference is circumstances, resources, luck, sometimes just timing. Her daughter, Naomi, was 16 when the trial happened, old enough to understand everything, old enough to be angry. I hate him, Naomi told me once, bluntly. Not just for what he did to Mom, for making her doubt herself, for making me doubt her. He almost convinced me that Mom was the problem, that she was too sensitive, too demanding. I almost believed him. But you didn't, I said. No, but I could have. That's what scares me. How easily I could have been manipulated too. Naomi went to college and majored in psychology. She wanted to understand how people like him operate, how they choose their victims, how to spot them before they do damage. She was writing her senior thesis on romance fraud when she called me for an interview. You were the first one to reach out, she said. To Beverly. That started everything. What made you do it? I thought about it. Fear, mostly. Fear that he was doing it again. That another woman was being lied to, the way I'd been lied to. I couldn't stop what happened to me, but maybe I could stop what happened next. Did you think she'd respond? Honestly? No, I thought she'd block me or tell me to leave her alone, but I had to try. Beverly got married, to the kind, patient man who'd understood her history. She invited me to the wedding. I went, bringing my daughter as my +1. It was a small ceremony, intimate and genuine. The groom looked at Beverly like she hung the moon. No red flags, no warning signs. Just two people who'd found each other and chose each other every day. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. At the reception, Beverly pulled me aside. Thank you, she said. For what? For reaching out that day. For not letting hate consume us. For showing me that we could turn something awful into something that mattered. For reminding me that not all endings have to be bitter. I hugged her. This woman who'd once been my nightmare had become my friend. Life was strange that way. Brooke sent a message during the reception, a photo of her standing on a beach at sunset. The caption read, "Starting fresh, finally free. Thank you for saving my life." I showed it to Beverly. We both cried happy tears. That night, I tucked my daughter into bed. She asked me if I thought I'd ever get married again. I told her honestly that I didn't know, that I wasn't looking for it, but I wasn't closed to it either. That the right person, if they existed, would be patient with my history and love her like she deserved. What if you never find anyone? She asked. Then I have you, I said. And that's more than enough. She smiled and rolled over to sleep. I watched her for a moment. This brave, observant child who'd inadvertently started everything by asking an innocent question. She'd saved us both, really. Her honesty had been the first crack in his facade. 5 years passed. I dated occasionally. Nothing serious. I was content with my life. My daughter was 14 now, confident and kind. She played varsity soccer, volunteered at an animal shelter, and talked about becoming a veterinarian. Beverly had a baby, a little girl named Hope. She sent me a photo from the hospital. She'll never know anything but love, Beverly texted. Breaking cycle starts now. Brooke was engaged, to a woman she'd met at a teacher's conference. Her messages were full of joy and excitement. She'd found herself after losing herself to someone else's lies. Rachel, the lawyer, called me one afternoon. I have a client, she said. She's going through something similar to what we went through. Different man, same pattern. She's terrified. Would you be willing to talk to her? I said yes. I met her at a coffee shop. Her name was Jasmine. She was 26, engaged to a man who ticked every box on the red flag list. I shared my story, Beverly's story, Brooke's story. I showed her the patterns, the warning signs, the exit strategies. You can leave, I told her. You deserve to leave, and you'll survive it, I promise. She called me 2 weeks later. She'd broken off the engagement, moved in with her sister, started therapy. Her voice shook, but there was steel underneath. She was going to make it. This became my new purpose. Rachel would call with clients who needed someone who understood. I'd meet them, share my story, offer hope, and concrete advice. Some listened, some didn't. But the ones who did, the ones who chose themselves over fear, made every difficult conversation worth it. My daughter came home from school one day when she was 15. She'd been assigned a project on personal heroes. She'd chosen to write about me. Why me? I asked, genuinely surprised. Because you saved yourself, she said simply. And then you saved other people. And you never let what he did make you bitter. I read her essay. It made me cry. She'd written about the night she asked about the sleepovers, about how she hadn't understood at the time what she'd revealed, but how she'd watched me handle everything with grace, about how she'd learned that leaving isn't failure, that protecting yourself is strength, that women supporting women is how cycles break. She got an A. But more importantly, she understood that our story wasn't one of victimhood. It was one of survival and transformation. The prison released my ex-husband after 4 years for good behavior. I got a notification. So did Beverly, Brooke, and the others. We'd all registered for alerts. He tried to contact me. A letter to my old address, forwarded by my lawyer. It was full of apologies and explanations. How he'd gotten help in prison. How he understood now what he'd done wrong. How he wanted to make amends, especially to our daughter. I read the letter 3 times, looking for anything genuine. Any hint of real remorse or understanding. But it was the same performance. Different audience. He wanted access, not forgiveness. He wanted to rehabilitate his image, not repair the damage. Detective Ramirez called me after he was released. He's on parole for another 6 years. Any contact with any of you violates his terms. If he reaches out, call me immediately. Does he know that? His parole officer made it very clear. But men like him tend to think rules don't apply. Stay vigilant. I didn't respond. Neither did anyone else. We'd learned that some people apologize not because they've changed, but because they want something. Access, forgiveness, another chance to manipulate. My daughter was 16 when he reached out directly. A Facebook message on her birthday. I think about you every day. I'm sorry for everything. I hope you can forgive me someday. Love, Dad. She showed me the message. What should I do? What do you want to do? I asked. She thought for a long moment. Then she blocked him and deleted the message. I don't need his apology, she said. I need my own peace. I'd never been prouder. She's 18 now, heading to college in the fall. Pre-veterinary medicine with a minor in psychology. She's beautiful and brilliant and kind. She has a solid friend group, a part-time job she loves, and a confidence that comes from knowing her worth. Sometimes she asks about that night, the night she asked about the sleepovers. Did you know then? She wants to know. Did you suspect? I suspected something was off, I tell her, but I didn't want to believe it. Your question forced me to face something I'd been avoiding. You saved us both. I was just confused, she says. I didn't mean to start anything. The best truths often come from honest questions, I say. You taught me that. Last month, Beverly, Brooke, and I met for lunch. An annual tradition we'd started after the trial. We caught up on our lives, our kids, our careers. Beverly's daughter was 3 now, smart and funny. Brooke's wedding was planned for next summer. I was seeing someone new, a widower who understood grief and rebuilt lives. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't found each other? Brooke asked. I'd probably still be paying his bills, Beverly said dryly. We laughed. Dark humor had become our coping mechanism. Seriously, though, I said, if my daughter hadn't asked that question, I might never have looked closely enough to see what was right in front of me. If Beverly hadn't responded to my message, we might have stayed enemies. If Brooke hadn't been brave enough to press charges, he might still be out there doing this to someone else. So what's the moral? Beverly asked. Listen to children, trust your instincts, women supporting women, all of the above, I said. And one more, your story doesn't end with the worst thing that happened to you. It starts there. We raised our glasses to survival, to sisterhood, to second chances and new chapters. My daughter graduates next week. She's giving a speech as valedictorian. I've read drafts of it. She's planning to talk about resilience, about the strength it takes to leave comfortable lies for uncomfortable truths, about how the people who hurt you don't get to define you. I'll be in the front row, watching her walk across that stage. This girl who asked an innocent question at 5 years old and changed the trajectory of not just our lives, but the lives of 5 other women. This young woman who learned early that love shouldn't hurt, that truth is powerful, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is ask the questions no one else wants to answer. She'll go to college. She'll build a life of her own. She'll find love, probably. The kind that's real and kind and honest and true. And if she ever needs me, I'll be there, just like I've always been. Because that's what we do. We survive. We heal. We support each other. We break cycles. We turn our pain into purpose. And we never ever let the worst moments of our lives define the rest of our story.